Princess Zara had always been different from other royal children. While her parents expected her to spend hours learning proper etiquette and studying diplomatic protocols, she preferred climbing the ancient crystal towers that surrounded their palace. Her royal tutors would find her sitting on the highest balcony, staring at the distant mountains and dreaming of adventures beyond the palace walls. At 17, Zara was considered an adult in her society, and her parents had very specific plans for her future. The Emperor and Empress had arranged for her to marry Prince Kael from the neighboring star system. This marriage wasn't about love or happiness. It was about politics, trade agreements, and maintaining peace between their two powerful worlds. Every morning Zara would wake up to another lesson about her future responsibilities. Her mother would remind her that being a princess meant putting duty before personal desires. Her father would explain how her marriage would strengthen their empire and protect millions of people. But deep down, Zara felt trapped in a life that didn't feel like her own. The thing that bothered Zara most was how everyone assumed she would simply agree to their plans. Nobody asked what she wanted or how she felt about marrying someone she had never met. Prince Kael might be handsome and wealthy, but Zara had never felt any romantic feelings for anyone. The whole idea of being someone's wife just because it was politically convenient made her stomach twist with anxiety. Instead of attending her boring royal lessons, Zara would sneak out to explore the forbidden ruins scattered across their planet. These ancient structures held mysteries that fascinated her far more than learning how to curtsy properly or which fork to use at formal dinners. The ruins contained strange symbols and technology from civilizations that had existed thousands of years before her people arrived on this world. Her favorite spot was an old observatory built into a mountainside cave. The ancient builders had created incredible star maps that showed distant galaxies and solar systems. Zara would spend hours tracing the patterns with her finger, wondering what kinds of people lived on those faraway worlds. She dreamed of traveling to new planets and meeting beings completely different from her own kind. Zara's people, the Viridians, were tall and graceful with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in their planet's twin suns. They communicated not just with words but also through gentle telepathic connections that allowed them to share emotions and basic thoughts. Most Viridians were calm, logical, and followed traditions without question. Zara felt like she was the only one who wanted something different. Her rebellious nature had caused countless problems for her parents. Royal advisors would complain that she was too independent and headstrong. They worried that her behavior would embarrass the royal family or create diplomatic incidents. The emperor had tried everything from hiring stricter tutors to threatening to confine her to the palace, but nothing worked. Zara always found ways to escape and continue her unauthorized adventures. The engagement to Prince Kael had been announced 3 months ago, and since then, the pressure on Zara had become unbearable. Wedding planners arrived daily with fabric, samples and flower arrangements. Diplomats from Kael's world sent gifts and formal letters expressing their excitement about the upcoming union. Everyone seemed thrilled about the marriage except the bride herself. Zara had tried to discuss her feelings with her parents, but they dismissed her concerns as typical teenage nervousness. Her mother assured her that love would grow over time and that duty was more important than fleeting emotions. Her father reminded her that royal marriages had always been about strengthening alliances rather than personal happiness. The worst part was that Zara couldn't even talk to her friends about her situation. Most of her childhood companions were children of other nobles who envied her position and couldn't understand why anyone would complain about marrying a handsome prince. They saw only the luxury and privilege, not the cage that came with royal life. As the wedding date approached, Zara felt increasingly desperate. She had considered running away, but where could a princess hide in a world where everyone knew her face? She had thought about refusing the marriage outright, but that would create a war between their worlds and put countless innocent lives at risk. Every option seemed to lead to either personal misery or widespread suffering. On the morning that changed everything, Zara was sitting in her favorite spot in the ancient observatory when she heard a sound she had never experienced before. It was like thunder, but sharper and more mechanical. Looking up through the crystal dome, she saw a streak of fire crossing the purple sky of her world. Something was falling from space, and it wasn't one of their ships. Viridian vessels moved silently through the atmosphere using crystal-powered engines that left no trail. This object was different, smaller, and clearly in trouble. As Zara watched in fascination, the unknown craft crashed somewhere in the direction of the palace gardens. Her first instinct was to run toward the crash site, but she forced herself to be careful. Her parents would be furious if they discovered she had been exploring the ruins again instead of attending her scheduled lessons with the royal seamstress. but curiosity won over caution, and Zara began making her way back toward the palace through hidden paths she had discovered during years of unauthorized adventures. By the time she reached the palace grounds, emergency teams had already surrounded the crash site. From her hiding spot behind a cluster of singing trees, Zara could see the wreckage of what appeared to be some kind of exploration vessel. The design was completely unfamiliar, with smooth metal surfaces and strange markings that didn't match any known language. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. As rescue workers carefully pulled someone from the wreckage, Zara realized that the pilot was unlike any being she had ever seen. Where Viridians were tall and slender, this creature was more compact and muscular. Instead of pale blue skin, the stranger had a warm brown complexion that seemed to glow with health and vitality. This was Zara's first glimpse of a human being, though she didn't know what to call this mysterious visitor from another world. All she knew was that her boring, predictable life had suddenly become very interesting, and for the first time in months, she felt genuinely excited about what might happen next. The stranger was alive but unconscious, and the medical teams quickly carried him into the palace for treatment. As Zara watched the procession disappear through the main entrance, she made a decision that would change everything. She was going to find a way to meet this mysterious visitor, even if it meant breaking even more rules than usual. After all, what was the worst that could happen? She was already facing a lifetime of unhappiness in an arranged marriage, at least. Now she had something interesting to distract her from her problems. And maybe, just maybe, this unexpected visitor would bring some excitement to her carefully controlled world. For 3 days after the crash, Zara could think about nothing except the mysterious stranger lying in the palace medical wing. She attended her royal lessons like usual, but her mind wandered constantly. During etiquette training, she found herself wondering what kind of world the visitor came from. While studying diplomatic protocols, she imagined what his voice might sound like when he finally woke up. The palace had been buzzing with activities since the crash. Scientists, doctors, and government officials hurried through the corridors, carrying strange devices and speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Zara's father had declared the entire medical wing off limits to anyone without special clearance, which naturally made her more determined than ever to get inside. On the 4th morning, Zara made her move. She had discovered years ago that the old servant passages connected to every room in the palace, including the medical wing. These narrow tunnels had been built centuries ago to allow staff to move around without being seen by the royal family. Now they would serve a very different purpose. Dressed in simple clothes, borrowed from her personal maid, Zara slipped into the hidden passages during the early morning shift change. The medical wing was always quieter at this time, with fewer guards and staff members around. Her heart pounded as she carefully made her way through the dusty corridors. Following a mental map she had memorized during childhood adventures, when she finally reached the observation panel that looked into the stranger's room, Zara had to cover her mouth to keep from gasping out loud. The being lying on the medical bed was even more fascinating than she had imagined. His features were so different from her own people, yet somehow appealing in their uniqueness. His skin had a warm, rich tone that seemed to radiate life, and his facial structure was strong but gentle. But what struck her most was how peaceful he looked while sleeping. Despite being injured and stranded on an alien world, his expression showed no fear or anger. There was something about his face that suggested kindness and intelligence, qualities that Zara had rarely seen in the nobles and politicians who usually surrounded her. The medical reports she had overheard indicated that he was healing well from his injuries. The doctors were amazed by his resilience and the rapid rate of his recovery. They had also discovered that despite his alien origin, his biological systems were remarkably similar to their own, which made treatment much easier than expected. The 5th day, Zara's patience was rewarded. While watching from her hidden position, she saw the stranger's eyes flutter open for the first time. He looked around the room with obvious confusion, taking in the crystal walls and floating light panels that marked Viridian technology. When he tried to sit up, his movements were careful and deliberate, showing both weakness from his injuries and an underlying strength of character. What happened next surprised everyone, including Zara. Instead of panicking or becoming aggressive, like many beings might when waking up in an alien environment, the stranger remained calm. He examined his surroundings with what appeared to be scientific curiosity, observing the medical equipment and architectural details with genuine interest rather than fear. That afternoon, Zara made a decision that would have horrified her parents if they had known about it. She waited until the medical staff went to lunch. then slipped out of the hidden passages and walked directly into the stranger's room. Her heart was beating so fast she was sure he would hear it, but she forced herself to appear confident and in control. The stranger's reaction when he saw her was exactly what she had hoped for. Instead of alarm or suspicion, his eyes lit up with curiosity and something that looked like relief. When he spoke, his voice was deeper than she had expected, with musical qualities that were completely different from Viridian speech patterns, of course. They couldn't understand each other. At first, his language was as foreign to her as hers was to him, but Zara had come prepared. She had borrowed a translation device from the linguistics department, a small crystal that could analyze speech patterns and create basic communication bridges between different species. Their first conversation was awkward and filled with long pauses as the device worked to process their different languages, but gradually, simple concepts began to get through. The stranger told her his name was Alex and that he was from a planet called Earth. He was a scientist who had been exploring distant galaxies when his ship malfunctioned and crashed on her world. Alex was amazed to discover that Zara was not just any Viridian, but actually the princess of their entire civilization. In his culture, he explained, leadership was often chosen by the people rather than inherited through family lines. The concept of being born into a role of responsibility was fascinating to him, though he could see that it brought challenges, as well as privileges. For her part, Zara was captivated by Alex's descriptions of Earth. He told her about a world with blue oceans and green forests, where billions of different creatures lived together in complex ecosystems. He described cities where beings like himself had built incredible structures that reached toward the sky, and vast wilderness areas where nature remained wild and untamed. But what interested Zara most were Alex's stories about human relationships and society. On Earth, he explained, people were free to choose their own partners based on personal connection and compatibility. The idea of arranged marriages existed in some cultures, but many humans believed that love should be freely given rather than politically negotiated. These conversations opened up entirely new ways of thinking for Zara. She had always assumed that duty and obligation were simply natural parts of adult life. The possibility that people might actually choose their own paths seemed both exciting and terrifying. What would it be like to make decisions based on personal desires rather than political necessity? Alex, meanwhile, was learning about the complexities of Viridian society and the pressures that came with royal responsibility. He began to understand why Zara seemed so conflicted about her upcoming marriage. In his culture, forcing someone into an unwanted relationship would be considered a serious violation of personal freedom. Their daily meetings became the highlight of Zara's otherwise dreary routine. She would slip away from royal obligations, whenever possible, to spend time learning about Alex's world and sharing stories about her own. These conversations were unlike anything she had experienced before. Alex listened to her thoughts and opinions as if they actually mattered, treating her as an individual rather than just a princess who needed to fulfill certain expectations. For the first time in her life, Zara felt truly understood by someone. Alex didn't judge her for questioning traditions or wanting something different from what others expected. Instead, he encouraged her curiosity and supported her desire to explore new ideas and possibilities. But their secret friendship couldn't remain hidden forever. Soon, important decisions would need to be made about Alex's future on their world, and Zara would have to face the reality of her approaching wedding date. The peaceful bubble they had created around their daily conversations was about to be tested by the harsh realities of politics and duty. 3 weeks had passed since Alex's arrival, and their secret meetings had become the most important part of Zara's day. Every morning she would count the hours until she could slip away to the medical wing and continue their conversations. What had started as simple curiosity had grown into something much deeper and more complicated. Alex was no longer just recovering from his injuries. The palace doctors had cleared him for light activities, though he was still confined to the medical wing while officials decided what to do with him. Some advisors wanted to study him further as a scientific specimen. Others believed he should be sent back to space as quickly as possible to avoid any diplomatic complications. But Zara had very different ideas about Alex's future. She had begun to realize that her feelings for him went far beyond friendship or curiosity. When she was with Alex, she felt like her true self for the first time in her life. He made her laugh with stories about Earth's strange customs and bizarre creatures. He listened to her dreams and fears without trying to fix or change her. Most importantly, he treated her as an equal rather than a princess who needed to be managed. The turning point came during one of their afternoon conversations, when Alex was describing human concepts of love and partnership. On Earth, he explained, people often spent years getting to know each other before making commitments. They shared experiences, learned about each other's personalities, and built trust over time. The idea was to find someone who truly understood and accepted you for who you really were. As Alex spoke, Zara felt something stirring inside her that she had never experienced before. It was like a warm energy spreading through her chest, making her feel both excited and nervous at the same time. For the first time, she understood what the ancient Viridian poets had written about when they described the connection between compatible souls. This realization terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. In just 2 months, she was supposed to marry Prince Kael in a ceremony that would seal the alliance between their worlds. The wedding preparations were already underway, with guests arriving from across the galaxy and elaborate decorations being installed throughout the palace. But now, sitting across from Alex and feeling this new awareness of her own heart, the thought of marrying someone else seemed impossible. How could she pledge her life to Prince Kael when every fiber of her being was drawn to this kind, intelligent human who had crashed into her world like a shooting star? Alex seemed to sense the change in her mood, though he couldn't read Viridian emotions as clearly as her own people could. When she tried to explain her confusion, he listened with the same patient attention he gave to all her words, but she could see concern growing in his eyes as he began to understand the impossible situation she was facing. The complications in their relationship weren't just emotional. There were practical problems that seemed to have no solutions. Alex was from a completely different species, living on a world so far away that even their fastest ships would take years to reach it. Even if Zara could somehow avoid her arranged marriage, what kind of future could they possibly have together? But the biggest obstacle was the approaching arrival of Prince Kael himself. For weeks, his diplomatic team had been sending messages about his planned visit to finalize the wedding arrangements. Now Zara learned from palace gossip that he would arrive in just 10 days for the official engagement ceremony. The engagement ceremony was a sacred Viridian tradition that would make the marriage legally binding, even though the actual wedding wouldn't happen for another month. Once Zara participated in that ritual, there would be no way to change her mind without creating a diplomatic crisis that could lead to war between their worlds. But, as the date approached, Zara found herself trapped between impossible choices. She could go through with the engagement and spend the rest of her life wondering what might have been with Alex, or she could somehow refuse the marriage and risk the consequences for millions of innocent people who depended on the peace treaty between their worlds. The weight of these decisions was crushing her spirit. She had always been strong and independent, but now she felt like she was drowning in circumstances beyond her control. The only bright spot in her days was the time she spent with Alex, learning about his world and sharing her own thoughts and dreams. Alex had begun teaching her about human customs and ways of thinking that were completely foreign to Viridian society. He described democratic governance where leaders were chosen by the people they served. He told her about artists and writers who created beautiful works simply because they felt inspired to do so. Most amazingly, he explained how humans often traveled to different places just to experience new things and learn about other ways of living. These conversations were opening Zara's mind to possibilities she had never imagined. What would it be like to choose your own purpose in life instead of having it chosen for you? What would it feel like to wake up every morning excited about the day ahead instead of dreading another round of royal obligations? But with each passing day, these dreams seemed more impossible to achieve. Zara was still a princess with responsibilities to her people. She couldn't simply abandon her duties because she had developed feelings for someone from another world. The rational part of her mind knew that Alex would eventually leave her planet and return to his own life among the stars. Yet every time she looked into his eyes and saw the genuine care and affection there, her resolve to be practical and responsible seemed to crumble a little more. For the first time in her life, she was beginning to understand why people might choose love over duty. Even when the cost seemed impossibly high, the crisis was building toward an inevitable conclusion, and Zara knew that soon she would have to make choices that would determine the rest of her life. The question was whether she would have the courage to follow her heart, even if it meant giving up everything she had ever known. Prince Kael arrived exactly on schedule, accompanied by a oppressive fleet of ships and a delegation of nobles from his home world. Zara watched from her bedroom window as the formal procession made its way through the palace gates, and her heart sank with each step that brought her closer to her unwanted future. The prince was everything her parents had promised he would be, Tall, handsome, and perfectly mannered, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. During their first formal meeting, he spoke eloquently about the benefits their marriage would bring to both their civilizations. He seemed genuinely pleased about their engagement and appeared to assume that she shared his enthusiasm. But as Zara sat through the endless meetings and ceremonies that marked his visit, all she could think about was Alex, still confined to the medical wing and probably wondering why she hadn't visited him in 3 days. The official schedule left no time for her secret trips to see him, and the constant supervision made it impossible to slip away unnoticed. The engagement ceremony was scheduled for the 5th day of Prince Kale's visit. According to tradition, it would take place in the Great Crystal Chamber, where thousands of guests would witness Zara and Kale exchange the sacred vows that would legally bind them together. Once those words were spoken, breaking the engagement would require a formal trial that could take years to resolve. As the day approached, Zara felt like she was sleepwalking through her own life. She attended fittings for her ceremonial gown, approved floral arrangements, and smiled politely during endless social events, but inside, she felt as if a part of her was dying with each passing hour. The night before the ceremony, Zara finally managed to escape her handlers long enough to visit Alex. What she found in the medical wing broke her heart. Alex had been watching the news broadcasts about her engagement, and the pain in his eyes was unmistakable. He had realized what was happening and was trying to be supportive, but she could see how much he was struggling with his own emotions. Their conversation that night was unlike any they had shared before. For the first time, they spoke openly about their feelings for each other. Alex admitted that he had never experienced anything like the connection he felt with Zara. She confessed that the thought of marrying Prince Kale while caring so deeply for someone else felt like a betrayal of her own soul. But what could they do? Alex was still technically a prisoner, with no rights or legal standing on her world. Zara was bound by duties and obligations that had been placed on her before she was even born. The situation seemed hopeless, and both of them knew it. As dawn approached and Zara prepared to leave for what might be their last private meeting, Alex made a decision that would change everything. He told her that he couldn't stand by and watch her sacrifice her happiness for political reasons. He was going to find a way to interrupt the ceremony and give her a chance to make a different choice. Zara was horrified by this plan. If Alex disrupted the engagement ceremony, he would be arrested and probably executed for interfering with royal proceedings. Even if he survived, his actions would create exactly the kind of diplomatic crisis that her marriage was supposed to prevent. But Alex had made up his mind. He explained that on Earth, people who truly cared about each other were willing to take risks to protect each other's happiness. He couldn't return to his own world, knowing that he had let fear prevent him from fighting for something that meant everything to both of them. The engagement ceremony began at noon with all the pageantry and grandeur that Viridian tradition demanded. Zara stood beside Prince Kale in her elaborate gown, surrounded by thousands of witnesses from across the galaxy. The ancient words of commitment echoed through the crystal chamber as the ceremony progressed toward the moment when their engagement would become legally binding. But just as Zara and Prince Kale were about to speak the final vows, a commotion erupted at the back of the chamber. Alex had somehow escaped from the medical wing and was making his way toward the ceremonial platform, calling out Zara's name and pleading with her not to go through with the marriage. The shock that rippled through the assembled crowd was unlike anything anyone had ever experienced at a royal ceremony. Guards rushed to stop Alex, but his desperate words had already reached Zara's ears. In that moment, with thousands of people watching and her entire future hanging in the balance, she had to make the most important decision of her life. Looking into Alex's eyes across the chaos of the disrupted ceremony, Zara realized that she couldn't live a lie just to fulfill other people's expectations. She loved Alex, and that love was more real and powerful than any political alliance or royal duty. In a voice that carried clearly through the stunned silence of the great chamber, Zara announced that she could not continue with the engagement. She declared her love for Alex and her refusal to marry someone she didn't care about, regardless of the political consequences. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Her parents were horrified, Prince Kale was insulted and angry, and the assembled guests erupted in shocked conversations about this unprecedented breach of royal protocol. But through it all, Zara felt a sense of relief and freedom that she had never experienced before. The aftermath of the disrupted engagement ceremony was unlike anything the Viridian court had ever witnessed. Within hours, Zara's dramatic declaration had become the most talked about event in recent galactic history. Some called her brave for following her heart, while others condemned her as selfish and irresponsible. Prince Kale, to everyone's surprise, handled the situation with more grace than anyone expected. After the initial shock wore off, he admitted privately to Zara's parents that he had also been having doubts about their arranged marriage. He had hoped that affection might grow between them over time, but he could see now that Zara's heart belonged elsewhere. More importantly, Prince Kael proved to be a skilled diplomat. Instead of declaring war or ending all relations between their worlds, he proposed a modified alliance that would maintain peace and trade without requiring a marriage. It would take longer to negotiate and might not be as strong as a family bond, but it would still serve both civilizations well. But Zara's decision came with a heavy price. According to ancient Viridian law, her refusal to fulfill her royal obligations meant that she would have to give up her claim to the throne. Her younger brother would become the heir instead, and she would be stripped of her royal titles and privileges. This consequence didn't surprise Zara, but it was still difficult to accept. Giving up her royal status meant losing the only life she had ever known. She would no longer live in the palace or enjoy the luxuries that came with being a princess. Most painfully, it would create a permanent rift between her and her parents, who felt deeply betrayed by her actions. But as Zara considered her options, she realized that losing her royal position might actually be a blessing in disguise. For the first time in her life, she would be free to make her own choices and determine her own future. She could explore the galaxy, learn about other civilizations, and build a life based on her own interests and values. Alex faced his own difficult decisions. His ship had been too badly damaged in the crash to ever fly again, which meant he was stranded on Zara's world unless he could find alternative transportation. Even if he could get home to Earth, the journey would take several years, and there was no guarantee that Zara would be welcome there. But Alex had been thinking about their situation from a different perspective. Instead of seeing their circumstances as obstacles, he began to view them as opportunities. Both of them were scientists and explorers at heart. Both were curious about other worlds and other ways of living. Why not combine their skills and interests to create a new kind of life together? Alex proposed that they become independent researchers and cultural ambassadors, traveling from world to world and helping different civilizations understand each other better. Zara's knowledge of galactic politics and Alex's scientific training would make them valuable mediators in disputes between species who had trouble communicating with each other. The idea excited Zara more than anything had in years. Instead of being trapped in a life of royal obligations, she could spend her time exploring new worlds and learning about different cultures. Instead of marrying someone chosen for political reasons, she could build a partnership with someone who truly understood and supported her dreams. Their first major challenge was simply leaving Zara's homeworld together. Her parents had forbidden Alex from having any contact with their daughter, and palace security was under orders to prevent them from meeting. But Zara had spent years learning how to move around the palace unseen, and Alex had proven his resourcefulness by escaping from the medical wing. Working together, they managed to secure passage on a merchant vessel that was leaving for the neutral trading stations at the edge of their solar system. It wasn't a comfortable journey, and they had to work as crew members to pay for their transportation, but it was the beginning of their new life together. Their first destination was a diplomatic conference on a distant world where several species were trying to resolve a territorial dispute. Zara and Alex offered their services as neutral mediators, using their combined knowledge to help the different groups understand each other's perspectives and find common ground. The work was challenging but deeply satisfying. For the first time, Zara felt like she was using her intelligence and education for something that truly mattered to her. Alex discovered that his scientific background gave him valuable insights into the practical problems that often underlay political conflicts. As they traveled from world to world, their partnership deepened in ways that went far beyond their work. They learned to trust each other completely, sharing not just their public mission but their private fears and dreams. The love that had brought them together grew stronger as they faced challenges and adventures side by side. What surprised them both was how much they enjoyed the simple pleasures of building a life together, sharing meals in the small cabin of whatever ship was carrying them to their next assignment, taking turns piloting their borrowed spacecraft through asteroid fields and nebulae, falling asleep together under the light of alien stars, planning their next adventure and talking about all the worlds they still wanted to see. Zara had discovered that choosing love over duty didn't mean abandoning all responsibility. Instead, it meant taking responsibility for her own happiness and using her freedom to make a positive difference in the galaxy. The stubborn princess, who had once resented every obligation, now threw herself wholeheartedly into work that she had chosen for herself. Alex had found something he hadn't even known he was looking for. His scientific career on Earth had been successful but lonely. Now he had a partner who shared his curiosity about the universe and supported his desire to explore and learn. Together, they were accomplishing things that neither could have achieved alone. Their story became legend among the spacefaring peoples of their region. Some called them the ambassador lovers, while others knew them as the wandering diplomats. But to each other they were simply Alex and Zara, two people who had been brave enough to choose love and adventure over safety and tradition. Years later, when asked about their decision to leave behind everything they had known, both would say the same thing. The greatest discoveries weren't always found in distant galaxies or ancient ruins. Sometimes the most amazing adventure was simply finding someone who saw the universe through your eyes and wanted to explore it by your side.